Hello, so today we're going to be going over what I think are the top 5 quote-unquote flexible comms for the upcoming Set 12 that's going to be releasing this week for TFT. So for those that don't know, this is a channel that I usually make VOD reviews of daily YouTube content. If you do like the content, please subscribe. Thank you very much to all the subscribers already. I'm hoping that we can hit 1,000 subs during this set. Because it's the start of the set, we're going to start by doing some extra resources. So the idea behind these resources is that I just want to give everybody a good idea of what I learned in PvE, as well as to give everybody a head start on what are some good comps to play, what are some strong units, and how to play around the new set and the new set mechanic. So in this video, we're going to go over the top 5 comps that I find that are quite flexible. They give you a good opportunity to easily rank up because you won't have to worry too much about being contested when you're playing these comps. In terms of where I got some of these resources, this is from Dysec, so I'll try and highlight it right like over here. He's an EU Challenger player, and now he has like a separate website. In the last PvE and the last early set, I used a lot of his resources as well. I find that he's one of the better creators of very informative resources, and he's usually very like correct, or at least it plays out to the meta really well. And I used that to base a lot of my predictions last set, and I felt like I was mostly right with those. So again, I'm using it to base some of my predictions here, help structure some of the boards, as well as I'm using my own experiences in playing PvE, which, you know, we've already seen a couple of those as I uploaded them onto YouTube. So the first one, the first comp I'm gonna point out is this is more like an honorable mention. So this comp is basically going to be, let me just open this. This is basically like Callista Bastions. So with Callista Bastions, this is like something that's been terrorizing the PvE for a while. It's a very strong comp. You're basically playing around Callista carry, and you're basically putting a Guinsu on Callista with Last Whisper. Callista is like an auto attacker style of unit, right? If we hover over, basically when she does her sphere, every couple attacks, she basically starts throwing more. She starts embedding extra spheres, and then she just does a shit ton of damage, right? So the main thing that you want to have is attack speed on her, which is why she's a really good Guinsu user. And a lot of times you're dual carrying Callista with Fiora, with Rakan as being like your main tank. Rakan you'll see in a lot of these boards. I think going into the set, the Preserver trait, which is Rakan's main defensive trait, is a little bit overtuned. Preservers in general, what they do is they help your whole board recover some HP as well as restore some mana. I find that Rakan in most boards just helps out a huge amount just in terms of synergies, being a 4-cost tank. Now this is just an honorable mention because it is pretty reliant on you playing around this Callista. I just really want to show it because it's one of the strongest comps going into set 12, it seems like. We're just playing Callista around Bastions. You could flex the front line a little bit and put some extra Bastions, play towards 4 Bastions and drop 2 of the Fairy units. But in general, the board kind of looks like this and is very strong. But it's not super flexible, but I just thought it was an honorable mention because there is a way to play around it, either flexing between carrying Fiora or carrying Callista, which can both work out really well in this type of situation. The next comp that we're going to go over, this is the first one, so this is number 5, and this is going to be Warriors. So Warriors is quite flexible. Whenever I'm talking about flexibility, a lot of times I'm talking about the options of different units as your primary carry, as well as comps that you have the option to reroll or to level and play around a 4-cost board, right? That kind of covers all of your angles of like, okay, if I get certain items, am I locked out of playing this comp that I'm basically picking augments towards, or if I get locked out because another person is contesting a reroll comp, do I have the option to play a 4-cost variation? This comp's very strong because you can play around Akali and Katarina. You can also play around Nyla. I've played boards. I'm going to remove these just to the bottom of the screen so we can draw our attention to these top couple units, right? There's a lot of times where I've played around Akali, Shen, Hecarim, Nyla as like a reroll style board. And I feel like it's somewhat strong. Some people are really skeptical about it. I found that it works out really well. Akali is really hard to play around unless you have an Edge of Night. Akali basically, she jumps in, she dives the backline, she does a shit ton of damage, she can win you the fight instantly, or she can throw the fight instantly and die. The only way I've found to make her consistently be a viable unit to play around is basically putting in the Edge of Night. That's probably the most important thing, so she de-aggros. But the other option is if you're not playing around like Akali reroll and playing around like vertical Pyro, because Pyro stacks, right? Pyro stacks your attack speed based on enemies that are killed. So if you have a Pyro spat and you have a Kali reroll, you can like go infinite by playing like 5 Pyro and like upgrading a bunch of units, blah blah blah. It's all good. You can also play Katarina reroll. Katarina is more like an AP unit. She would basically have like the same items that Gwen has, probably with like a like Hodge JG and then plus the fairy item that you get because she's a fairy unit. But typically, if you're playing around a 4-cost board, you're basically just trying to itemize as many of these units as possible based on your items. A lot of times you're going towards a Fiora, Gwen, carry, and you're playing 4 warrior, right? Gwen, it's usually Hodge JG. I don't know what the last item is. I really liked when I played blue buff on her, so I think blue buff is pretty good, but I think it's debatable what her third item is. She just does really, really well with Hodge JG, both glove items, so she has a lot of crit chance, and she does a lot of healing as well as scaling up off of those. I've seen Nashor's Tooth as well because melee units love attack speed, which also synergizes well with the Pyro buffing your whole team's attack speed. And then Fiora, a lot of times it's like Sterix and Bloodthirster is a good item combo that just makes her go really strong. And then, as of course, we can't have a board without Rakan. Rakan's one of the best tanks in my opinion. I feel like you just fit him into every board. Put in the Bard for Preserver. A lot of this feels like the Reaper board where you're just synergizing with each of the units that are on your board. You have like the extra little 2 trait synergy that helps to strengthen up each of them. And then you have Hecarim in here. That, you know, he applies the, you know, on later levels you can put in Arcana to buff your whole board that he synergizes with, or you can put in the multi-strikers to help that aspect of your board as well if you're playing around like a Kali 3-star. But there's many options here, very flexible, pretty easy to play, and lots of great options as the number 5 pick. My number 4 pick, so this one, maybe it's a little bit debatable. I'm going to put Fiora up here. This is, it looks similar to the other one, but this is basically just Sugarcraft. Now, I say that's really flexible. I personally love Sugarcraft. I think this is going to be my go-to trait. I think it's a little bit strong, but I'm not entirely sure exactly how strong it's going to be, because, like, you know, final adjustments going from PB to real, as well as, like, how it works if you're, like, super contested. But basically with Sugarcraft, if you don't know, the way Sugarcraft works is that you build cake layers, and the cake layers are built based on the amount of sugars that you gain based on the amount of components that are slammed, right? So for every component that a unit on your board is holding, you stack sugar, which stacks cake layers, which then scales up your attack damage and your AP, right? As you can see, they can attack damage and ability powder increase by 10% for each cake layer. So you want to try and build up to 7 layers as fast as possible. This is a scaling augment similar to 8-bit, similar to Dryad. So a lot of the main condition that you need for this is you need Sugarcraft early, right? So that's like your main thing. If you have Sugarcraft like 2-1, like start of the game, then you can probably play towards this comp. If you don't have Sugarcraft in 2-1, then you probably can't play towards this comp. That's kind of how it rolls. Now, when you're playing Sugarcraft, you can carry multiple units. You can either carry Gwen, Jinx, or Bard, typically, because you're stacking Sugarcraft. This is a 6 Sugarcraft variation, so this requires 1 craftable emblem. If you do not have the emblem, then you can basically just drop Soraka, because you basically be losing this emblem, and then you can lose Soraka, which is kind of like an extra unit anyways, that not really doing much except synergizing your board, and then you basically have a free open spot for somebody else. Here I'm talking about Gwen carry primarily because you can play Fiora, and this is a really strong board. Of course, we put in Rakan again, get that Preserver trade in, Rumble's the Sugarcraft frontline unit, and then you're playing a Vanguard to synergize with the Rumble, which is the Tahm Kench. Now, the synergies are going to be a little bit messed up on the side because depending on if you're playing a Jinx or Bard, I've had a lot of success playing Jinx reroll with this type of setup. So you can always, if you can't really play towards Gwen or you're not going to make it to level 8, sorry, then you can reroll on level 7, you can play Jinx, and then you just fit in 1 extra hunter. You don't have to worry too much about the Fiora. These Fiora items can go on Olaf if you already dedicated items towards that. If you're not playing around Jinx, I've seen Bard get played. I haven't personally tried it out, so I'm not sure the strength of Bard relative to the rest of these units. I've played around Gwen and Jinx a lot, but then you can play an extra Scholar unit. Here I put in Xerath to get the Arcana synergy. I think Xerath is the best option for Scholar, but if not, or sorry, not Scholar. I need a Milio. Milio would be the best option, sorry, because then you get your Fairy Crown that you can synergize with the Rakan. And then with Milio also drops extra items, which can really help out your board strength in general. because if you place your Milio around one of your Sugarcraft units that's scaling up that doesn't have items, the Milio can drop those items on it. I put some example items here. I found that this item combination worked really well with Jinx. I found that this item combination worked really well with Gwen. Rakan, a lot of times you want Warmogs because Rakan's ability scales with their HP, so it helps out to have like Warmogs and then plus the really, really tanky items. Olaf isn't that great of a carry a lot of times, so don't bank on playing around Olaf, but this is usually what you would play just to synergize for the Jinx. Yeah, so that's a Sugarcraft in a nutshell. As I said before, if you're missing the Sugarcraft emblem, you just drop Soraka and you can play an extra synergy to help strengthen your board out a little bit. And that's why I find it really flexible. There's like 3 or 4 units that you can play around depending on who you hit. You can just throw in the extra units to synergize and you can probably play for a top 4. Next, this is one that I talk about a lot, that I usually like, or at least I mention at least a couple times a day. It's mages. Mages is very strong. Mage reroll is absolutely demon-like, and a lot of it revolves around this Vex unit being such a good tank. Vex is a frontline unit in this set, and frontline Vex is absolutely a nuisance. She is very, very tanky. And here I actually put in something that's like maybe secret tech. I don't know if it's real tech. Vex is like the resident Tahm Kench of this set, because if you read her description, she gains a AP shield, and then when it expires, she does magic damage. Doesn't that sound familiar? Because if it does, it sounds a lot like Tahm Kench in set 11. And guess what? I've seen it done in PvE. Forbidden Idol is the tech, right? You get your shield converted to max health. If you want to make an even more demon tankier, Forbidden Idol artifact, this comp is probably hard forceable the same way Tahm Kench and Bard was with a Forbidden Idol. If you get a Forbidden Idol with a Vex, you can probably play around it. Viger's also an interesting unit. Viger scales off of the set mechanic of this set, right? Sorry, it's confusing words, but his passive is that he gains ability power for every charm that you buy. So if you know that you're playing towards mages, you can just buy charms every single round. It really works well with reroll because the charms take up a shop slot. So if you buy a charm, reroll, or if you're rerolling and then you buy a charm, you basically buy a charm every single round to make sure that Viger scales up his AP as much as possible to make him competitive in those late game scenarios. And then Mage makes it so that you cast an extra time, right? Their abilities cast twice, so Viger damage goes up, Vex shielding goes up, everybody helps out, and Nami's really good at stunning and spreading damage across the whole board. So a lot of times you'll put like things like Shiv, like your utility item. She's really good at holding utility items. Now the thing is, because Vex is so tanky, even if Vex 2 is really strong, you can even play like an AP flex line, right? Your backline can be pretty much anything. I've seen for Chrono Synergy, I've seen you can easily put Viger items on a Karma 2 and easily out DPS in that type of way. You can drop your total mages down to like something like 3 mages and just play around the Nami, the Vex, and the +1 with the Galio. And then in this case, we're just full synergizing the front board, giving a bunch of Vanguard synergy traits, and then plus an Incanter to play around the Karma. The extra units here don't matter that much. I've even played games where I had a Viger 2 and it was strong much into late game just because you scale your AP if you dedicate yourself to buying charms very early. Here you can also go for Mordekaiser 3, which is another option. If you have Mage +1, or if you have the option to level, you can play 5 Mage, and even with the other board, you can play 7 Mage. There's lots of options to cap out your board, and they all seem very good. A lot of it revolves around how strong of a tank Vex is, and how reliable some of these backline units are at doing damage, whether it be Karma, whether it be Nami with stunning, or whether it be, well, Nami doesn't do that much damage, but Viger does do a lot of damage. Even at 1-star, 2-star, you can really make that work out. Next, we're going to talk about one of the... Now, this comp, I gave it a number 2 because of how demon-like it is in PvE. It's just so strong. This is going to be Incanter, Syndra / Cassio, right? Ooh, I spelled Cassio wrong. I'm just going to put Cassio like that, right? Like, this comp is kind of insane. And a lot of it revolves around, once again, these 3-star, 3-cost frontline units being absolute monsters. Nico specifically is one of like the best tanks, as well as Swain. When you have them at 3-star, they're both shapeshifters, which is basically the equivalent of Bruiser. They have so much HP and they're so hard to deal with. And then if you pair that up with putting Preservers in, here I have some 5-cost units in. Don't get too stressed out. You can play lower cost versions of these 5-cost units. It's mostly just an idea of like a max cap board in this case. But it's just absolutely like disgusting. Because what you do is you put Preserver in with the Shapeshifters. They gain a shit ton of HP. They are so strong. They are so tanky. They're so hard to deal with. And then on top of it, Preserver recovers maximum HP every second, as well as grants extra grants extra mana if you already are at max HP. The main carry in this comp, just surprisingly, a lot of people really prioritize Cassiopeia. I want to make it very clear, I've tried this comp out a lot. I released a video yesterday on it, I talked about this. I don't think that Cassiopeia is like the main prioritization in this comp. I think it's Syndra as well as your front line. If you get Syndra 3, Syndra 3 out damages the Cassiopeia by a long shot. In PvE stats, which, you know, obviously take with a grain of salt because it's PvE, I think Syndra is like the best performing 2 cost. She is broken. She is very strong. Don't make the mistake of like saying, oh, I need to make Guinsoo, I need to make Guinsoo, I need to make Cassiopeia strong. It's like, no, just prio the Syndra items first. Trust me, I'm pretty sure that'll be good. You know, I can't guarantee you everything working out for you, but, you know, it's pretty reliable in that way. The reason I put this as a flexible comp, though, is because of the front line, right? If you can play around this front line, as well as the back line a little bit, you don't even need to play all of these units, right? Remember the mage setup? This is like a very AP flex board, right? You can easily play like a Karma, a Nami, and a Syndra in the back line, right? Like, let's say we drop all of these dudes, and we just play like Karma, right? Karma, Nami, right? Like, let's say you're contesting, you really have to play around something like this. You can easily switch your board out to play something like this instead, right? You probably won't hit Morgana for a while, so now you have like extra space, right? You can just play extra frontline units, probably fit in a Bastion, fit in Eldritch, fit in Chrono, right? Guess what? Look who's back. Vex, right? You can easily like structure a nice board around just having these 2 frontline units as well as Preserver as a trait in. And then, you know, if you high roll and you hit your better Preserver units, you can play something like this, get in that Witchcraft, and play around like a Syndra. You know, if you hit the Syndra 3, if you don't hit the Syndra 3, you can play around Karma. Preserver with the Nico Swain is just so strong that I feel pretty confident that you can make a reliable front line that is very strong in this type of setup. And that's why I consider it to be very flexible if you're able to play around Nico Swain. With this with a AP generic backline. Obviously, if you're playing reroll and you hit the Syndra and the Cassiopeia, you can definitely play around those, but I definitely think the Nico Swain are like the true stars that make this comp shine, and that gives you a lot of flexibility on how you play your backline. Finally, last but not least, the most, you know, one of the most broken flexible options that I think is blasters. You might maybe this is out of left field, maybe people don't agree with me, but I think blasters are absolutely disgusting in terms of your options that you can play when you commit to a line like this. The thing with blasters is that typically you're playing around a Varus carry, right? Varus is this unit right here. Varus is Pyro scales off attack speed. Right here I'm putting in a 4 Pyro build, prioritizing around the 4-star Varus unit. Varus does a shit ton of damage. He basically jumps up, he shoots his giant AoE thing, goes pow pow pow, it hits everybody. It's ridiculous. The thing that's really insane about Varus is that you can build like IE, Last Whisper, he spreads it to everybody, does a shit ton of damage, and then the last item usually makes Shojin, so he gets a bunch of casts off. The thing that's the most insane is that with Pyro, you basically scale your attack speed and you get a lot of damage off, right? Blaster kind of works out in a way that you gain like a damage amp after casting your ability. And what's really crazy is if you can cast your ability within that window of 3 seconds of the damage amp, which sometimes happens, sometimes doesn't. But with Pyro especially, with the scaling attack speed, often you might get off a cast with that same level of damage. And it's kind of just like, it's a thing of beauty. The whole board gets deleted. The thing about this board that makes it so flexible is that there's so many options to play around. This is a very Pyro-centric build. Let's just drop for a second just to theorycraft a little bit. Well, actually, let's put back in Shen. A really like stronger board version where you don't play all Pyro, I think is something like you play Tarek and Shen instead. Obviously, I have Smolder in. We can switch Smolder for somebody else, just another blaster unit. It's just for the sake of Dragon basically gives you anti-heal, so you don't have to worry about an anti-heal item. And we can play this instead, right? Get in Bastion. Bastion gives armor to your whole team, so it makes everybody tanky. Very much appreciated by the team. You can also drop these 2 units and play Preservers to help out the Nasus, because Nasus is a shapeshifter. You have that same synergy like the Nico board that I just showed. But let's just dwell on this for a second. As you can see here, if you get like generic items for Varus, you can play the AD items for Varus, right? If you don't hit Varus and you're in a bad spot and you need to commit to a reroll, What you could do is go for 3-star Ezreal. Ezreal pretty much likes the exact same items as Varus. I've seen in some different tutorials and stuff, I've seen because Ezreal kind of jumps around and sometimes griefs the game, to put healing on Ezreal like Hodge instead. But you could easily just put all the same items that you put on Varus on Ezreal, and they should do really well. Ezreal is very strong in PvE. I've had a lot of fun playing with Ezreal. Ezreal 1, Ezreal 2, super stable. When you're rerolling Ezreal, a lot of times you might want to reroll just 6 portal, right? Help out to get that extra portal buffs. You might want to reroll it with blasters in general. But the thing is, you can easily just play around Ezreal Hui, right? If you get mat AP items, one of the biggest problems is like, you know, if you're playing like an AD line and you're like, oh yeah, I made an IE and now I have like a bunch of AP items, what do I do? You can play around Hui, right? Hui can take in all those AP items. If you get dropped a bunch of rods and a bunch of tiers, guess what? You can make Hui items, and Hui does just as much damage, really strong, also a 3-cost reroll. So depending on what you're playing around, if you're playing around AP, AD, or just trying to do like the max cap board, you have somebody that can hold all of your items. You can put your frontline items really easy on any of your frontline units. There's different stabilizations. Tarek's one of the best 4-cost frontlines. A little bit hard to fit in with some boards, but he really shines when you have a Bastion frontline. Nasus is one of the best frontline units, also scales with the as the fight goes on, right? We have Shen, which can synergize with Bastion, that all synergize with Pyro. You can cap out really high as well. If you get a blaster +1, you can play 6 blaster. You can also just play everybody, right? And it makes use of Smolder, which Smolder is a very strong 5-cost unit, but also the Dragon synergy allows you to not have to worry about making an anti-heal item, which gives you some more flexibility in how you use your items towards frontline as well as backline units. So there's really nothing you can miss, like besides like if you go for a reroll and you don't hit the units. As long as your spot is good for blasters in general, like you start with an early Ezreal, early Hui, you have a lot of options to like play around a decently capped board, and that's why this takes my #1 spot, because I think all the options that you have are all like game-winning options. Varus is one of the best units so far, according to how he's performing in PvE, and Ezreal and Hui are just absolute monsters that might be slept on. So that's like the main video, right? If you like this, like I said before, make sure to like and subscribe. Sorry I'm doing this a little bit late. I had a day, right? I'm having a lot of days this week. Hopefully I'm up. I said that I promised that I'd do a long PvE or a long PvE's grind streams, as well as a long set 12 release stream this week when it comes out. So hopefully all of those are still on schedule. Make sure to, like I said, like and subscribe, because it really helps me out as a small creator. And hopefully I'm right about a lot of these comps. Hopefully when you boot up into the game, if you're just starting on day 1, hopefully my meta read and my read of some of these units are correct. I think there will be a lot of rerolls, because that's how usually the sets start. So I didn't go into too much in terms of like strict reroll comps, which there are a couple other ones like Honeymancy and the Bees and all of that. But I really want to start out by making a flexible kind of tier list thing, and then later on, probably later in the week when the set releases and we get a little bit more of a read, I'll do like a more detailed guide on specific reroll / 4-cost comps that came out. But thank you for watching, and hopefully this was an enjoyable one. Have a great rest of the day.